Welcome everyone to the Shonenflop Language Supplemental. I am your host, Tucker Whatley, and today we are taking a look at the use of language in the series Hungry Joker, which is a work from the past by the author of the popular series Black Clover. Now, David and Jordan told me that they thought this would be way easier for me because a lot of these characters just have Western names, but as it turns out, after researching this, that's not the case. So we actually have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. First up, we have the author of the manga, which is Tabata Yūki Tabata. Main thing to note is to make sure that you pronounce the Tabata, all of those syllables with exactly the same amount of stress. It's not Tabata, it's Tabata. And then there's Yūki, which keep in mind that the U sound, the is long, so it gets approximately twice as long of a pronunciation than the ki. So once again, that is Tabata Yūki, Tabata Yūki, Tabata Yūki. Now we're moving into the protagonist of the series, whose name is Heidi. Okay, this one isn't that hard, but it's interesting to note that in Japanese, in the katakana, it is written as Haiji with a G sound at the end. And the reason why is because Japanese does not allow for the combination of sounds D. There's da and de, but no D. It's just not allowed. So it gets turned into G when imported into Japanese. But I think it's best to just pronounce it like the original German would be, so it's Heidi. I always thought this was a girl's name, but maybe there are guy Heidis out there? I don't know. Now we have another Japanese character name, and this one is a doozy. It is the character Torioji Chitose. Torioji Chitose. And I know it's really easy to freak out looking at it, but it's not too bad once you know why the name looks the way it is. So their given name, Chitose, that's not bad, but the family name is a bit of a weird one. First of all, you'll notice I didn't say Uji. That's because double O in Japanese is not pronounced like oo. It's just a long O. So that would get 2 beats. But you'll remember I told you before in a previous episode that usually that long O sound is written as OU. And yes, it usually is. But sometimes it's written as OO. And it's a little complicated to explain why. And a lot of it probably has to do with sound changes that happened before the spelling of words were changed. But just know that it's pretty much just an O, long O sound. But it's not just that. There are 2 I's because the I sound is long as well. And the reason why it is long is because the 2 beats of the long I sound are provided by 2 different kanji or ideas. This person's family name is written with 4 kanji, which is unusually long, and it is written with the kanji for bird, reside, big, and road. So I guess it means like the big road where the birds live or something like that. So Tori, you may know that, Tori, Tori is bird, so that's where that comes from. And then the next kanji, reside, gets the reading E. So that E combines with the Tori and makes that E long. Tori. Like that. Then you have the big, which in this case gets one of several readings that it can get, and it is OO. So the big kanji is one of the ones where when you're writing it out in kana, instead of writing OU, you write OO. It's a weird historical thing, but that's what you do. And so it gets that reading here too. So that's where the OO comes from. And then you have just G, which is road. So altogether, it's Torioji. And you can even make beats while you're doing that and slow it down if you need help doing it. It's a difficult one. It's maybe one of the most difficult to parse Japanese names I've seen in a long time. So once again, it's Torioji Chitose. Torioji Chitose. Actually, I think I did the O too short that time. Torioji Chitose. Torioji Chitose. Even I'm having difficulty with that one. Alright, now we're going into some more German with the brother of the main character Heidi, who goes by the name of Nacht. That's Nacht. You'll notice I made a weird sound there. The word Nacht is the German word for night, and it contains CH, which is a consonant that we do not have in English. It is called a voiceless velar fricative, and that sounds complicated, but I'll break it down. Voiceless means that your vocal cords are not vibrating whenever you pronounce this consonant. So if you want to touch your throat, you can notice when you say something like a ka and ga. During one of those, your vocal cord is vibrating, and while the other one it is not. You can also say s and z. Those two sounds, the only thing different between them is that one of them, your vocal cord is vibrating, and the other it is not. So whenever it is vibrating, you call that a voiced consonant, and whenever it is not, it is a voiceless consonant. So this is a voiceless one, so your voice box is not going to be vibrating. It is velar because the place of articulation is the velum, or the velar plate. What is that? Now, if you want to feel around in your mouth a little bit with your tongue, you'll notice that at the very roof of your mouth, there is a very hard, bony-like thing. You know, you can kind of feel it in there. And that is called the palate. But if you feel a little bit further back, not all the way down to your throat, you know, you're not your uvula, but above that, but behind your hard palate, is the velum, or the soft palate. And that is the place that your tongue, you know, towards like the middle back of your tongue, is going to be making contact with when creating this sound. And the final part of that, fricative, means that it is a sound created by the friction of air hissing through a constricted passageway. So sounds like s and h are fricatives. F is a fricative. So anything where the airflow is not stopped, but is merely constricted and then becomes a hissing-like noise is a fricative. So you put that all together, it is a voiceless velar fricative. Aha, 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 Nacht, Nacht. Might take a little, you know, practice to be able to do that right. But if you can't, a k sound there is probably a good substitute. You can't pronounce that. But what is not a good substitute is the way they wrote it out in katakana. In katakana, Nacht's name is written as Nashasu. Like, what? Like, I get, like, that's, you know, German is really hard, probably really hard to write out in Japanese. We don't even have the h sound in English, let alone definitely not in Japanese. So I could see how the author would struggle to write this out, but this is just a terrible way of writing this out. It's na-sha-su in katakana. Why the s at the end of it? Why not just to? Why not like nakuto? Would be like a way better way of writing this down in katakana. So pay no attention to the way that the author wrote it. He obviously really does not understand German very well, as we're going to go into more in a little bit. But it's Nacht. Nacht. Next, we're moving on to yet another European language, and this time it's French. And it is a character, Vivienne Blanchard. Vivienne Blanchard. If you don't speak any French, that might sound really crazy to you, but let's talk about this for a bit. First of all, I noticed when I was doing my research that this character's name was spelt out Vivian, like the English name Vivian, Vivian, and I can see why some people would do that if you're not familiar with French, because in katakana, I'll get to that in a bit, that does represent pretty well what is written out in the katakana version, but that is not the proper French name. In French, this woman's name would be Vivienne. Vivienne. So that would be spelt V-I-V-I-E-N-N-E. And those syllables would be V-V-N. Getting the gist of French pronunciation is hard, and I could probably go on a real long time about some of this stuff. But what you should know about French is that, like Japanese, no syllables get stressed or get more stressed than the other ones. That's a weird thing that Japanese and French have in common. And also, French is also fairly rhythmically based, like in Japanese. It actually kind of operates on a similar beat-like structure. Now, French doesn't have like the long and short vowels, thankfully. But it is weird, because you notice like Vivienne is 3 syllables, but that last syllable kind of gets like 2 beats. And whenever there are consonant sounds at the end of words in French, it tends to be like that. So if you like want to improve your French pronunciation, that's a good thing to keep in mind. And then we have the last name, which is spelled out. Seems like a proper spelling of it is Blanchard. Now you notice the way I pronounce it is probably pretty different from the way that a non-French speaker would pronounce it when looking at it. But let's break it down a little bit. So it starts with BLA, that's alright. But then there's that N there. And something you need to know about French pronunciation is that whenever an N comes after a vowel, that doesn't really mean that you pronounce the consonant N. In fact, that N is not pronounced, but what it does is it nasalizes the previous vowel. Or should I say, to be more accurate, it means that nasalized vowels are written with a vowel plus an M or an M after it. And I could go really long into the history of the French language and how the spelling system preserves old things and stuff. Oh, I don't have enough time for that. Maybe some other time. Maybe if you have a series where we go into a ton of French characters, like it's all French and all based in France, I could go way more hardcore into that stuff. But first, what you need to know is nasalized vowels. When I say nasalized, it means that whenever you're pronouncing the vowel, in addition to air flowing out of your mouth, it also goes out through your nose at the same time, and that alters the tone of it. So A-N, that A, thankfully for you, is an easy one. Some of these are actually very difficult, even for me. It is basically just an A sound plus nasalization. So in order to practice this, you can pronounce an A sound and try sliding back and forth between nasalized and unnasalized by making air go out just through your mouth and through your mouth and your nose. So there's like that. Notice the second one, like that. So blanc is that first syllable. CH in French is just a sh sound, like our SH. So that's easy. And then you get the end of the word, which is, I don't know, it freaks people out a lot, but French spelling and pronunciation and stuff, but it's very pattern based. You can get it. So the thing is you need to know is that D at the end is not pronounced at all. You don't pronounce it. Just ignore that D. I could go into reasons for that, but just that D is not pronounced. So that R is pronounced. But the thing is, French R's are a completely different sound from a American English R, or rather the sound that is represented by the Latin letter R is completely unrelated to our English sound. In fact, our English R is very, very weird and exists in a very tiny percentage of the world's languages. That's beside the point. I'm getting off track. French is a little difficult. But that R is a voiced uvular fricative. Now, the voiced and the fricative part I just described earlier, so you know what that means. That means that the voice box is vibrating whenever you're making the sound, and it's fricative in that it is made by turbulence caused by constricting a passageway, creating a hissing-like noise, which is, of course, extremely different. Our R sound is nothing like that at all. It's like an approximant or a rotary. It's actually way more complicated. But uvular, you probably guess what that means. It has to do, the place of articulation is the uvula. You know the thing in cartoons whenever, like, you know, Jerry is in Tom the cat's mouse and then, like, starts using the weird hangy thing in the back of the throat as a punching bag? That's the uvula. And so the French R that is the place of articulation. So it's voiced. So the very back of the tongue is going to go press up against the uvula and constrict the air. Not completely stop it, but constrict the air going around there, creating hissing noise while the vocal box vibrates. So it's something like an ra, 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 like that. And that's probably not perfect, but hey, it's pretty close. So this is a hard one for you to get. So you could try to approximate a different-ish sound for that, but do try. It's not impossible. So put all together, this is Vivienne Blanchard. Vivienne Blanchard. So yeah, that's a difficult one. Oh, and the katakana is actually much better than the Nacht one. It's written out as Vivian Blanchard. So at least the author knew that D was silent. So that is completely not in there. So I commend them on that. They even, the V, there's no V sound in Japanese, so they actually have a way of kind of representing it where they have U, but they have like a weird marking next to it, to say that it's not an sound, it's like supposed to be a representation of V, which just doesn't exist in Japanese. I would have done the an as N instead, but hey, much closer than the other one. Next, we have the character killed, and that's just the English word killed. Weird thing to name a character, but it is what it is. In Japanese, it's just written as kirudo, but yeah, it's just the English word killed. Then is Alan Blackman. It's another easy one that actually doesn't sound that bad. And in Japanese, it's just written as Alan Burakuman, which is, pretty good. However, the author's naming conventions being okay ends right here because we are going into a character who is supposed to be Italian, and I almost do not want to say his name. In Japanese, in katakana, it is Rizu Akiranti, and it is written out as Rizaquillanti in the romanization. And as for pronouncing it, oh boy, yeesh. Let's get in. Okay, so if I were to guess a way of pronouncing this, I would say Rizaquillanti. But there almost really isn't a correct pronunciation for this. First of all, let's talk about the first name. R-I-Z, Riz. That is very much not Italian at all. I have no idea what the author was going for or why they did that. The Z at the end, Z's in Italian are like TS's, so is this supposed to be something like Ritz? Like Ritz, almost? But that's definitely not Italian. But you would never have like a Z sound at the end of a word like that, pretty much. It's just bizarre. It's like, doesn't even track as vaguely Italian. And then you have the last name, which is more passably Italian, but the way it is written out in Romaji, in Roman characters, and the way it is written out in katakana, in the original work, it has two different pronunciations. So basically, the author was mistaken in how QU is pronounced in Italian. In the katakana, he spells it like it's just making like an Akilanti, like that. And while QU works like that in Spanish and in French, in Italian, QU actually works pretty much like it does in English, where it's like a qua sound. So it's actually Aquillanti and not Aquilanti, like that. So the way it's written out in katakana is incorrect for the way that it is written out in Roman letters. If it did make that ki sound, then it should be a CHI instead of a QUI. So because of all those weird issues with the name, I'm not really sure how you should pronounce it, but I'm willing to guess that the author didn't mean for there to be a TS sound at the end there, so I would say it's something like Rizaquillanti, but there really is no right answer there. And finally, for names, we have another one that I really don't want to say out loud. And I think what the author was going for was Niels Lees, maybe. That's the way I see it written out in Roman letters. And it is written out in katakana as nirusu, risu, like that. The big problem with this, well, the biggest problem with this is that this character is supposed to be French, from France. This is extremely not a French name. Like, I have no idea where they got this. It's absurdly not French. If you told me this was an English person's name, maybe that would work. But not French. Nothing about it is French at all. Like, the way it's written out wouldn't work in French. You put this in front of a French person and tell them it's a French name, they wouldn't know how to pronounce it. Because it's just not how things are written out in French. It's not how things sound in French. It's just not French. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. And the way it's written out in katakana makes it sound like the name should be something more like Niels Reese. Like Reese instead of Lees. Like the family name, it's like a long Lee, like that. Reese, which makes it sound like it should be Reese, not Lees. It's just so weird. It's so weird. So honestly, do whatever you want when pronouncing that. There literally is no correct way of pronouncing it because it's just a enigma of a naming choice. I'd also like to just briefly talk about a few phrases I saw show up when I was doing my research for this. The first is the German word Barschheit. Barschheit. B-A-R-S-C-H-H-E-I-T. So the big thing you gotta know is the SCH in German is pretty much always sh, like our SH, and EI is always an I sound, like that. And AR, if you're going to do it like a standard High German, Hochdeutsch, it's called, accent, just basically pronounce it like you're British. So just say Barschheit, like that, and kind of drop the R sound. It's a good way of doing it. But I was looking into this, and I'm really confused about what the author's intent with the use of this word was. So this is a nickname a character has for their brother, and it really doesn't make any sense at all in German. So the word Barschheit, well, first of all, let's just say the word Barsch is an adjective. It means like someone being rude or snippy or short or curt with someone. Being like really snappy with someone. Like being, just vaguely aggravated and rude, like being short with someone. And Barschheit is the noun version of that, where it's like rudeness or shortness or snippiness, stuff like that. So that is like a nickname to someone. I don't understand it at all, how that happened. It sounds really bizarre and doesn't make much sense. My theory, and I'm not very familiar with this series, but my theory is that the author wanted to have a German word, a German nickname for the older brother character to give the younger brother, and wanted it to be something like shorty or something like that, to be something about height, I think, and just looked up like a translation of the Japanese term for short into German, and this came out because it also does like technically mean short, but you're not talking about height. It's like short as in like giving short, aggravated replies to someone. And they saw that and like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll just copy that over. That's just my theory. Maybe the character, it's because they're super rude or something like that. But I didn't get the sense of that. It seemed like a sign of affection. So I don't know, it's confusing. It's like another case of this author just really not caring at all if their use of this foreign language actually made any sort of sense. They just wanted a word from a foreign language, and they didn't really care that much if it made much sense. And finally, we have a word borrowed from ancient Greek, a word that has also been borrowed into the English language. But the thing is, our version of it is actually the one that's screwed up. This is the word Eureka. Eureka. Notice I didn't say Eureka here. So this comes from ancient Greek. It means I have found it. I believe it comes from a famous instance of a Greek philosopher who came up with a solution to some sort of problem while taking a bath, like in a public bath, and then quickly ran out, maybe naked, I don't know, down the street toward the king, shouting, I have found it! I have found it! And in Greek that is Eureka! Eureka! Like that. And in Japanese, in the katakana, they write that as Eureka! Eureka! Like that. So the EU is supposed to be pronounced like an EU sort of thing. EU. Those syllables separately. You can pronounce this the, standard English way if you want, Eureka. But honestly, I would recommend pronouncing it Eureka and leaving out that weird invisible Y sound in front of it and the E pronunciation of the A sound there. You do you, but I think you get extra brownie points if you pronounce it a more logical, correct way. The English pronunciation is the way it is, most likely because of sound changes that occurred in English after the writing system had already been set in stone for a long time, so they didn't change the way things are spelt to reflect the way people actually say them. So Eureka became Eureka. So do what you want, but I recommend going Eureka, and once you get used to saying that, you can know how to pronounce the name of that one mecha series correctly. And that about does it for this installment of the language supplemental for Shonen Flopcast. It's a long one, definitely the longest one I've done yet. But when you got more languages, you got more opportunities to screw everything up. I've been your host, Tucker Whatley, and you can find me on the internets by going to tuckerwhatley.com, TuckerWhatley. You could find me on Twitter at Tucker Whatley, no punctuation, spelled exactly the same way. Or just throw my name into the Googles. There aren't any other Tucker Whatleys out there, so you're going to get stuff that I've done no matter what when you search that way. But I hope everyone out there is being safe and is at least managing to have a little bit of fun. Until next time, see you, Space Cowboy.